Do you ever feel dog mom guilt? You know those days when you barely remember to feed your dog and you definitely don't have time for play or to give your dog enough attention? Please say I'm not the only one. Recently, I met Susan Frank, a lovely woman who's the host of the Raising Your Paws podcast that provides easy tips and practical solutions for caring for the four-legged members of your family. I asked Susan if maybe she would be interested in sharing some tips for how we can activate and enrich our dogs' lives even when life is busy, and she was. Susan is the past host of the Wild About Pets radio show. She worked as the volunteer coordinator at Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, Illinois, and she's also worked for the National Park Service and at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Hello and welcome, Susan. How's your day going over there in Chicago?
Hello, Helen. The day's going great, and I am delighted to be on your show.
I am so excited you're here. Thank you again for taking your time to be with me today and to share some of your knowledge and experiences. So, Susan, I know you have a dog called Rosie. Have you ever felt that dog mom guilt I was talking about?
Oh, yes, Helen. In fact, when I first adopted Rosie, which was about 5 years ago, because I got her when she was 1 year old and she's 6 now, I had not had a dog as an adult. The last time I had a dog was when I was a kid. It was a beagle, and my family was clueless about what to do with dogs. I mean, we had no idea. And so when I got Rosie, this was my first dog as an adult. And truthfully, I was a nervous wreck. I wanted to be perfect. And I spent a lot of the first year worrying. Was I taking her for enough walks? Was I playing with her enough? How can I manage my job, doing everything I need to do in my household, and meet her needs? So, yes, as I said, I went through a lot of anxiety, and I finally worked it out. And I'm here to say that, there are moments where I still wish I could devote more time to her, but I know now I'm doing the best, that I can for her. And there are easy ways in which to do that.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone. And don't we all feel that way? I wish I could spend all days with my dogs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm so curious to hear what you have to say. So, as we heard in the introduction, you have a long background of both working with animals and interviewing animal experts. Can you tell us what you've learned about enriching our dogs' lives? Like, is this something we actually should worry about? And if so, why?
Yes, sure. I'd love to talk about what's known as environmental enrichment. And it's something that we need to provide for our pets, dogs and cats, although I know we're going to talk about dogs today, to try and really make sure that we are doing the best for their physical and their mental welfare. Because these are, these vulnerable, dependent creatures in our care. And, if we're going to bring a pet into our lives, I believe it is our responsibility to do the best for them. So anyway, getting into the zoo world, environmental enrichment is the way that the zookeepers give the animals under their care the opportunity to express their natural behaviors. And so, in a way, zookeepers try and preserve and encourage and challenge those natural animal instincts. Now, of course, we're talking about wild animals, but let's take that to our dogs. Clearly, dogs, when they live with us, are in a way a captive animal. Helen, there are leash laws, and I know throughout a lot of the United States, dogs can't just wander freely. I wish my dog was out on a farm and I lived in a community where I could let my dog out in the morning and my dog could roam and visit and do whatever she wanted and come back at night. But that's just not my reality. No. How about where you live?
Oh, it's the same here, and I feel very much the same.
Right. So, these dogs, these animals are not quite living the natural, normal life that they would, even though they are domesticated. So that means we also want to try and replicate or duplicate giving them the opportunity to express their natural behaviors. And so what I want to share is basically when it gets down to dogs, there's a lot of, things to know about our dogs. Like the top true things about what canines are like. But one of the major truths about a canine is they are predators. Now, so obviously what I mean is they're meat eaters. And yes, we know our dogs can eat fruits and vegetables. Rosie loves blueberries and carrots. So in one way, they are rather omnivorous, meaning they can eat plants or animals. But still, biologically, they are designed to spend a lot of time in food acquisition, and a lot of their behaviors are very deeply embedded to be those predators and find food. So my point about that is, again, if we are trying to enrich our dogs' lives, what you want to do is keep the fact that you've got a predator in mind. And so there are certain behaviors that come natural to them. And as you hear me talk, Helen, about some of the natural predatory sequence that a dog goes through, this also helps explain to pet owners or pet parents, whichever term you like, why they're going to see some of these behaviors in their dogs. And then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to give the dogs outlets for that. So can I go through this, the prey sequence?
Yes, please do.
Okay, so first of all, obviously, when your dog would be looking for food, they're going to be searching for the food. That means finding the prey, mostly using their nose. So, of course, they want to sniff it out. Then a dog would normally stalk, and that's where they're, moving steadily, approaching that prey. Then they may be rushing towards it, so, running rapidly towards the prey. We see our dogs want to do that. And, of course, that leads into the chase. So if that prey animal, like that rabbit or whatever it is that animal the dog is trying to, catch, is running away, the dog is chasing it. Then, hallelujah, let's say the dog catches, dinner. So they're gonna want to bite it and hold it and shake it and kill the prey. Then they would dissect that animal and then they'd eat it. A great way for us to enrich our dog's lives is to provide some outlet for the dog that involve those behaviors. And practically what that means, Helen, is we want to play games that involve searching, stalking, chasing, grabbing, and holding sequence.
Yeah.
And that is a way in which to add some of that enrichment to their lives.
So say then that the rain is pouring outside or the weekend is fully booked and you don't have time for, the long Sunday walk or whatever you want to do with your dog. So what are some easy things we can do to stimulate them with that in mind?
So getting back to that prey sequence, some of the searching out and stalking, there are hide-and-seek games you can play in the house. And, of course, you could do this outside, but let's use your example. Let's talk about that you've had a long day at work and you're exhausted and, you just don't have the time to take that, 15, 20-minute or longer walk with your dog. Or let's say the weather is miserable. It's raining or it's, freezing cold outside. There are a lot of hide-and-seek games you can play inside that are going to engage some of, those natural instinctual behaviors. And here's one that I like to play the most. So what I do is with Rosie, I put her into a sit-stay in the living room. Now, she's used to this because I've played this many times with her. So I just, get her sitting down in the living room, and I tell her to sit and stay. If dogs are not doing that, if your dog doesn't do that well, what you can do is, put your dog in a room and shut the door and keep them there. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a favorite toy and you're going to be hiding it. Or maybe a chew toy. I use some of those very strong either bully sticks or something that will take a long time for Rosie to chew. And so I put her into the sit-stay, and then what I do is I go hide that. And then I come back in the room, and I use, if it's a toy, I'll say, "Where's your toy?" And that is her release to go look and sniff it out and find it. Or if it's a chew toy, I'll say, go find. And so she has to go find the room. She goes running around and finding that. and she's got to discover where I tucked it, and then, of course, she gets it. And if it's a toy, then she brings it to me, and we play with the toy a little bit. Let's
Uh-huh.
say if it's a ball, then I throw the ball a little while. If it's a tug toy, then we play 10 or 12 seconds of tug, and then
Hmm.
I can repeat this. I can go hide it again. Now, of course, with the chew toy,
Ah.
once she's found the toy, then again, since she's such a rough chewer, a strong chewer, I always have things that are going to take her at least, a half hour or so. And then after doing the work to go find it, then she gets to chew on it. So that's one
Interesting.
hide and seek game. Another thing I really want to encourage is using mealtime as a foraging time. Now you have dogs, right?
I have a shepherd mix and a greyhound.
Okay, what does mealtime generally look like for your dog?
Well, you mean like the routine around the meals or?
Yeah, I mean, do you have a nice little ceramic or steel bowls and you just plop the food in the bowl? How do you usually feed your dog?
Well, first of all, they know when it's mealtime, like because I take the bowls out of the cupboard, right? So then I
Uh-huh.
ask them to go to their beds and then they have to stay in their bed while I'm preparing their food. And then I put the bowls down and then they look at me with begging eyes.
Right.
And then I give them the go ahead to start eating. And then it's so sweet. Usually after they come up and kind of give me a kiss or thank me almost like for the food, or my husband for that matter. That's our little routine, I guess.
Okay, I'd like to encourage you to try something new.
Oh.
And it would be using mealtime as an opportunity for them to do some of what they would in the wild.
Oh.
Obviously, let's say if your dog is catching, let's say, a rodent or something, that rodent just doesn't plop itself down in a metal bowl and lie there and wait for your dog to eat it.
True.
Remember, the natural thing is the searching, the stalking, the rushing, the chasing. So what I do with Rosie is often I will take 5 to 8 or 10 little bowls. And I have some bowls
Oh.
that I have bought that are designed for this, that are little plastic bowls, but they have a little bit of weight. And I will divide Rosie's meal into these bowls. And then
Oh.
I, again, put her into a sit-stay, or I could put her into the room, maybe in the bedroom and shut the door. And then I take those bowls and I hide them all over my home.
Oh, wow.
And then I release her, and then what she's doing is she's foraging, and this is, of course, what wolves would be doing, and our dogs, evolved from wolves. She has
Uh-huh.
to go around all over, smell out, and then eat that food. And you might think it's a
Ah.
really simple little thing, but it's mental work for her, and it's replicating what a dog would normally do in hunting out there, finding their prey, and a simple thing like that really adds enrichment. Or I
Mhm.
sometimes take her food, her meal, and I put it into a Kong toy,
Mhm.
and I freeze it.
Yeah.
And so you have to think a little bit overnight.
Mhm.
So I've frozen it, and then when it's mealtime, I can give that to her, and it's going to take her a long time to lick it out, especially when it's frozen, and especially if I have to leave the house. Let's say I'm going out and it's her
Mhm.
mealtime. I know it's a safe way for her to be fed. I don't have to worry when she's licking it out of a Kong, and it
Mhm.
keeps her occupied. And it's another great way to enrich the day. And on the days that I don't freeze it, I have a lot of different ways to dispense her meals. And I put
Mhm.
them in lots of different things. I hide them. She's got to go find it, and she's got to lick it out. So it slows her down
Yes.
for eating, and it gives her something to do.
This is also interesting. Now, I want to go back to what you said, even about the playing part, because I've been doing hide and seek, especially my shepherd mix. She loves doing that. But to think of it as that sequence, I don't remember now what you called it.
The prey sequence.
Yes, that actually to think of it as okay, they're going hunting, and then they need kind of the tug or the work that comes after the hunting is super interesting. And the same now what you're saying with the food. Now, in my case, and I think a lot of other people's cases, they might have two dogs. Would you then just kind of separate them out in the house somehow so they don't eat each other's food because they both have different, amounts of food that they should eat? Or what? How would you go about that? Feed one dog at a time, or?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that because people have expressed the concern that one dog may be very apt to resource guard.
Yeah.
And yes, you can get into conflict if you have two pets. So yes, I would probably need to separate the dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be on a case-to-case basis. If you've got more than one dog, you will know if your dogs are going to compete and get into trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Can they, can you hide them in so many places that the dogs will go their own way, or do you need to separate and feed one at a time? In cases when, people have told me, oh no, they would be at each other's throat for those games, I do say then, okay,
Yeah.
then, maybe give half of a meal to one in a room with the door shut, so, because that dog can smell the food, that's
Yeah.
out there. Let that dog eat half of the meal while the other one is playing,
Oh, yeah.
finding and foraging, then switch it. Then, give the other dog who was just in the room eating out of the bowl, take some of the food, or let them play the game while you bring the other one, and maybe just separate them to avoid conflict.
Yeah. One of my two, they're both girls, is like much more on it and much faster than the other one. So that means that she will probably get most of the food, whereas the other one is like, where is it now?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Also, are you familiar with puzzle feeders?
Yes. Mm-hmm. But please tell the listeners, for those that might not know what it is.
Sure. Puzzle feeders are basically like little toys that dispense the food. And there are commercial ones that you can buy. So you could just go online and put in dog puzzle feeders.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see lots of different commercial ones, but ones can be made at home. One of the easiest ones I do for Rosie is I take those paper towel roll tubes, after I've used up my paper towels,
Uh-huh.
I keep those tubes, and I close one end,
Uh-huh.
I kind of fold it in, and sometimes I even put a piece of tape. I use kind of like a painter's tape because it comes off easy and Rosie won't eat it or anything, and it's not toxic.
Uh-huh.
And then I put, if I'm feeding kibble, because obviously this works better with kibble. Wet food, it would get yucky in the cardboard. So if I put some kibble, I put it in, and then I take the other end of the tube, and I close it shut, and I call Rosie over to me. I put her in the sit. I hold it out. I tell her to take it, then she takes it in her mouth, and then she goes over to this one place in the living room, and she can tear apart the cardboard tube, which is great fun.
Uh-huh.
And then she's getting the kibble, is dispensing it. So that's a homemade one. But also with two pets, as long as they're not too competitive.
Yeah.
A commercial one that I have, there's all these little slots and compartments with little wooden doors. And so I divide up the food into these little compartments. I shut the little wooden doors, and then I lay it on the ground, or sometimes I put it up higher onto a couch or some surface where she has to change her position, and she's using her paws or her nose to open those little compartments and get into the food. That's another way to slow them down and to give them a mental challenge when they're feeding.
Yeah. Yeah, these are some really great tips. So what are some physical activities? This is kind of physical, I guess, but are there other physical activities that you would recommend?
Yes. There's actually a number of different things, two of which I've done and two of which I want to mention.
Mm-hmm.
So again, let's say you should be exercising more with your dog and getting your dog out more, but maybe it's challenging. And this was exactly my circumstance. I used to be able to take Rosie to daycare, and she would go about once a week. And sometimes, I couldn't, let's say, if my cash flow was, changing, but that gave her a lot of play, and it would tire her out. But then she had injured a leg. She had a partial ACL tear, and I had to stop taking her to daycare because of the rubber flooring. The problem, the rubber flooring can be wonderful in some ways, but for a dog with an injury, the problem is, that rubber flooring grips their paw, and if Rosie twists fast, that could tear that ACL, that I didn't have to have surgery on. So she can't go to daycare anymore, and I was racking my brain during the winter, because here in Chicagoland, we have brutal cold winters. What can I do with this dog? I, of course, was still walking with her, but I started doing agility classes.
Oh, fun.
And agility, basically what it is it's an obstacle course for a dog, and the obstacle course consists of things like tunnels and climbing frames, maybe weave poles. And so the dog negotiates the order and goes through these different obstacles, accompanied by the person, me, who would be called the handler, or if you were to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's great fun for the dogs. It's actually great exercise for the person. And you know, if you got a fast dog, you may be moving a little faster, but there's people of all physical abilities. So sometimes people will walk a little slower as they're leading the dog through. But I found during the winter it was a great, fun physical activity for both of us. It increased our bond because your dog starts taking the cues from you. So you're bonding with your dog, you're learning together, and it's a great form of exercise. So if you have a little bit of money to spend on a class, that's a great thing. And again, all you would do is you'd go online and you'd look up dog agility classes, you know, wherever you live. Now, let's say you don't have the money to invest in the classes. You can set up your own obstacle courses if you have like a backyard or some land that you could have your dog run free. Because obviously they're going to go through the obstacles pretty much off leash, you know, after a while. But you can get your own tunnels. You can set up your own little obstacles. You can set up your own little platforms that the dogs would jump up and down on. And again, you are walking through and leading them through this obstacle course. Again, I recommend go online and you can look up videos of dogs going through an agility class to really help you understand better than what I'm describing. So that's one of the physical activities I'd recommend. There's another one, and this one is called luring, or like there's a lure course, and lure spelling L-U-R-E, because I know, here, on the podcast it's hard to understand. And this is, people who do this say it's the favorite activity. And what it is it's basically a chase in a large open field, and there's an artificial prey object called like the bunny that's moved ahead of the dog by some mechanical pulley. And so each dog would take a turn and, can be judged on their speed, agility, and style, although it doesn't have to be a competition. And so this mechanical device is pulling like this bunny, and sometimes it's even in a circle, and the dog is out and out chasing after it. And it surprises some people when they see their dog, who they never realized, loved to chase, when they go into high gear and all of a sudden they start chasing this thing. It's another great form of exercise. And people actually can compete in that. Oh, by the way, in agility, I was only doing it for fun. I was not competing. But you can get to the point where if your dog is really great and fast and you want to go to competition level and go through trials and win awards, people do that. I was just doing it for fun with Rosie. There's agility, there's lure coursing, but the thing that I really recommend the most, which I've also done, is called nose work. And the best thing about nose work, Helen, is every single dog can do this, because every dog has a nose. Any age dog, puppies to very elderly dogs, dogs that, maybe don't move so much, dogs that have some disabilities. Any dog can do nose work. And essentially, what nose work is, it was inspired by the work that detection dogs do, the narcotic or bomb-sniffing dogs. And so it's basically a search and scenting activity. Nose work initiates with getting your dog excited about using its nose to seek out a favorite toy or a treat reward that usually get hidden in one of several boxes. And then the game gets expanded to searching for, let's say, that toy or treat in an entire room of boxes. You can move it to the exteriors and even vehicles. And as dogs grow more confident with this, sometimes then a target odor is introduced. It's not a food treat anymore. It's like a little birch or anise or a clove smell. And then you can compete for this too. It's easy to learn. It's an activity and a sport. It builds confidence and focus, and it's a safe way to keep dogs fit and healthy through both mental and physical exercise. Now, I did do the classes, so I've done nose work classes, but the best thing is once you kind of learn the skill, you can bring it into your house. and set up the nose work, little using those little scents that, the target odors here. Or I'm going to give you some tips in a second for how to use nose work on the most basic level. But this is the one that I really highly recommend because you can do it anytime, any age, indoors or outdoors.
That's awesome. And that actually just answered my next question, which was, age specific. This seems like that would cover it all. And I like that you can also take it to whatever level you like, right?
Yes. And it's wonderful. When in some of the last class I had taken, there was a dog who was very fearful, very shy, took a long time. First, came into the room and would just freeze, was just scared seeing the people around. And usually the other dogs are, either in a little cage that, we've brought in, like a portable kennel, or they're outside in another people's car. So there's only one dog doing nose work at a time.
Mm-hmm.
They're segregated, so they take turns. But this dog was petrified, didn't even want to move, didn't even want to look at the instructor. And in time, this dog got so much more confident, and then she was moving from box to box, and it's amazing when you see that. So any dog can learn it, and all it takes is patience. And it doesn't take very much from the handler because basically we're letting the dog do its thing. You're standing there with its leash and letting the dog lead you to the boxes.
Oh, that sounds so fun. I really want to try this out now.
Here's what I like to do. Going back to that enrichment in the household. And again, what can you do? It's a rainy day. How can you keep your dog active? There's a way that I use nose. I get Rosie's nose engaged. You're kind of doing nose work that actually can be just as tiring as physical activity, because we underestimate the idea that a dog using their nose, they're thinking, they're using their brain. They've got remarkable noses. In fact, this is one of the reasons why nose work is so great. Did you know your average dog's nose is tens of thousands times as sensitive to odors as yours is?
Yeah, that's amazing. No, I've heard some different comparisons, but yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, well, they possess up to 300 million olfactory receptors in their noses compared to we've got about 6 million in ours.
Wow.
And the part of a dog's brain that's devoted to analyzing smells is, proportionally speaking, 40 times greater than ours.
Oh my gosh.
Here's a great thing, though. As a dog scientist, here's a way to describe it a little bit better. Dogs can detect some odors in parts per trillion, and we hear that and we say, well, that's meaningless. We don't understand what that means. Here's a nice little example that a dog scientist came up with. So a dog's ability is they can catch a whiff of one rotten apple in 2 million barrels of apples.
No way. That's crazy.
Yes. So they've got these absolutely astounding senses of smell. So here is something, and I play this almost every single night. I want to capitalize on that amazing ability of her nose, and I want to tire her out because sometimes I can't give Rosie, who really needs an hour and a half of physical activity a day. If I can't get that in a day, here's what I do. So again, I put her into a sit stay, and then I take treats. Like maybe I take a piece of kibble, but it's got to be something she likes, and little tiny bits. Obviously, it's got to be something that they're going to be motivated to find. And then I take a treat, and I again move into my office, or I find somewhere and I hide that treat. And sometimes I just do one at a time, or sometimes I might do a number. Maybe I'll hide 5 little tiny little pieces of food, and obviously I'm going to use a piece of kibble that I can tuck somewhere that won't stain anything, instead of like a piece of chicken. And then I release her and I tell her to go find, and then she's working because you literally, Helen, will hear the sound of the sniffing. It sounds very different. Your dog is working. And you start out easy. So I will say you'd start out very easy. You show her, okay, I'm putting this treat and I'm hiding it under here, and you let her go find it. And she saw it, and then she finds it. Yay! And then you
Uh-huh.
put her sit and stay, and then again, maybe hide it a little harder, but letting her watch. Then you progressively get harder and harder where she doesn't even see you in the room. This is where I am with Rosie. She
Uh-huh.
doesn't even have to see where I am, and she goes in, and her tail starts wagging. She's so excited, and she goes and she sniffs out, and it's instant reward. She finds it, yay, and then she's going on to another one. And this is what I do. And again, one little piece at a time, and she can be working on this for quite a while. And it's
Mm-hmm.
surprising how it will tire her out.
Yeah. No, that's actually my favorite game. I use it with both my dogs almost daily too, for that reason that you mentioned. I love that game. And now it was interesting what you said with the connection to the brain, because I've heard that thing that dogs are getting tired and by using their nose, but I've never realized or never understood why that is. But you say that there is a connection actually with how the brain works with the scent. Is that right?
Well, they're thinking. They're
Mm-hmm.
thinking, and we could go into kind of how dogs' noses work. They work on some different levels, but I don't think I'll get into that right now. But to say that your dog is thinking,
Mm-hmm.
when they're having to search it out. And when you watch this, they'll walk in one way, and they'll no, it's not there. So you'll see them turn, and they'll no, it's not there, and they have to hunt it out. And so their brain is getting engaged, and
Yeah.
that is what is helping them. Oh, that reminds me. Speaking of that, I think when we walk our dogs, we get kind of impatient.
Yeah.
I don't know. Don't you hear people say, I wanted to go for a walk and my dog stopped every 5 feet, and we didn't get anywhere. What I'd want to say about that is if you got a dog who is primarily a major scent hound, and
Mm-hmm.
some want to walk more than smell. My dog is partly a big scent hound. Sometimes if I go out and if she just wants to smell for 10 minutes instead of walking,
Mm-hmm.
that is fine because she's
Ah.
doing what she needs to do. And I think we have to keep in mind for a dog, it's like, especially in the morning when she's walking her territory,
Mm-hmm.
she's reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
She's finding out all the news, that happened, the day or the night before. And so she's working very hard at detecting odors and smelling. And so I used to think, no, she has to walk.
Yep.
Well, if what she wants to do, if I've only got 10 minutes to smell, that's fine. Let
Mm.
her smell for those 10 minutes because she's still working. She's doing something.
Relating back to my everyday life with my girls too, just as you're talking about all this. Yeah, it's hard sometimes. I'm just like, come on now, girls, it's time to move it.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
But that's good to know though. That makes me feel better. And I think a lot of people out there too, especially knowing that if you just give them that opportunity to smell, that's helpful too.
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, you have provided us with so many good tips and information. Really interesting, Susan. Now, let's end with a Porla and Pine question. What is inner peace and joyful living for you? And when do you experience it?
For me, Helen, it has a lot to do with being able to slow down and mostly spend time outdoors. And so what that means is I I need to get outside. I especially like being around water, and I'm fortunate that I live in an area where I can either find some streams or some creeks to be by, or of course I live not far from Lake Michigan. So
Mm.
my preferred thing to do is get outside, be by a body of water in solitude,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just be able to spend time outside. And that's what allows um, that feeling where the cares drop away. It's almost like I can't even think anymore in a wonderful, blissful way. And it's a way that I kind of center myself within my busy day and doing all the work and the things I love. But that's what allows the cares to drop away, and I just get quiet, and that basically recharges my batteries. And so I need to make time for that. And then that helps fill me with joy again, especially, let's say, if I'm looking at beautiful changing, leaves on a tree, or I'm gazing at the water, or sometimes even if I find some bench to sit on out somewhere in a lovely, quiet area. That's what I need to do.
Oh, that sounds so wonderful. What time is it? Can we go out right now? Well, it's been wonderful to have you here, Susan. Thank you so much for taking your time. I very much appreciate it. Now, if people want to receive more tips about how to care for our dogs, where can they find you?
You can hear Raising Your Paws podcast on iTunes or Stitcher or Google Play or any of your favorite podcast apps. The show is for dogs and cats, and also so you can listen on your smartphones or your tablets. But one of the easiest things to do is go to the podcast website, which is www.raisingyourpaws.com. And that way you can access the podcast either on iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And you can also read my matching blog that goes along with the podcast, where I also adding new resources or additional content, and the full show notes for my podcast are there at raisingyourpaws.com. And for people who want to listen on their desktop, it's the easiest way to do it on the website.
And on that website, you get to see some photos too, right?
Yes. This is where I have photos and some videos that accompany what we've talked about on the show.
Yeah, no, I was checking it out. I'm a little behind. I have to catch up on your podcast because I very much enjoyed the episodes that I've been listening to. So highly recommend people to go and check it out.
I'm glad you're enjoying them. And thank you for listening, Helen.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you again, Susan. Lovely to have you. I hope you will have the chance to go out and sit on a bench and enjoy some water, perhaps, and some nature. And thank you again.
I will. And it's been my pleasure to be on the show.
Thanks.